This presentation, we're going to talk about electronic security and workflow and beyond meaningful use. We're really going to explore just a few electronic security issues most of you know a lot about as you work in healthcare. We're also going to look for ways to secure information on the computer network and some various ways that we authorize the users of these security systems or information systems and authenticate their reason for being in whatever program or doing whatever they're doing, and some kind of methods to anticipate and prevent typical threats to network security. So let's talk a little bit about securing network information. Anytime we link more than one computer together, it creates the possibility of a breach of some kind of network security and exposes the information to unauthorized users. So there are really three main areas that are used to secure information technology or information on computer technology systems: confidentiality, availability, and integrity. So confidentiality, we all know what that is. It's the safeguarding of all personal information by ensuring that access is limited only to those who are authorized. You know, some of the systems in the hospital or in the clinics or different places, even in the academic setting, people only have access to the information that they need to do their job and nothing more. Shoulder surfing or watching over someone's back while they're working is still a major way that confidentiality is breached. There's also acceptable use. Organizations protect the availability of their networks with an acceptable use policy. It defines the type of activities that are acceptable and not acceptable and consequences of those actions. So, can you be on Facebook? Can you be on your cell phone? What can you get on YouTube? What kind of things can you get on the system that you're using at work? Information integrity. So the quality and accuracy of the network information. There's very clear policies about how data is actually inputted. So what you have to put into what chart, who can change that data. We all know we don't want anybody to be authorized to change the data that we put into our charts when we're taking care of patients. And what are the consequences of those actions? Um, just like things like not accessing your own information when you're in the hospital, different things like that, and teaching that to students. They seem to not, many of them not understand that they can, even though it's information about themselves, they still cannot access their own charts. Information integrity, we just talked about, and authentication of users, so that employees who are using these different systems have a way by the organization to be authorized. So they either have, of course, passwords, or like now at UnityPoint, and I'm sure at OSF in their system, they have ID badges. So the scan and go, one log on, and then biometrics. Excuse me, fingerprints, retinal identification, stuff like that. Most of the time, there are also policies in place for how often you have to change your password. And organizations use combinations of these types of authentication to protect their systems. So let's talk a little bit about threats to security. Um, a nationwide study that was done by Computing Technology Industry Association found that human error was the most likely cause of problems with security breaches. Now we know we're only human and we're going to make errors. So systems and things have to be put in place to help us so that that doesn't happen. The first line of defense, of course, is physical. So there are locked doors, or the system locks out in 5 minutes if you forget to sign out. Regular training programs about security so that people are well informed about what to do. Um, Limits to what you can write to files, different things that you can do on the computer. Also, a new trend is that organizations are turning off the CD and the DVD burners and the USB ports. So things can't be inputted into the system that can compromise it, and things can't be copied off of the system that could breach confidentiality. Um, Now, one of the most common threats that a corporate network faces is outside threats. We know hackers and malicious code, spyware, Trojan horses. We all have those problems even on our own personal computers. Now, usually spyware is controlled by limiting the functions of the browser to surf the internet, because that's where we get spyware and all those things that attach to the files that we download or look at and then take over our computers. There's also a thing called a cookie. It's a very small file written to the hard drive of a user who's surfing the net. Um, the negative side is that it lets someone follow our travels. That's why Amazon knows exactly what I shopped for someplace else when those ads come up on the side of my Amazon account page. On a negative side, then it can see my travels. Um, Spying cookies related to marketing really don't count keystrokes, but other spying software does. It steals your user ID and your password and puts malicious by putting malicious code on innocent files that you click on and then it downloads to your computer. Another huge threat to corporate security is social engineering, or the manipulation of a relationship based on one's position in the organization and then somebody else gets the information from them. One of the number one security threats to a corporate network is malicious insider. You know, someone who's been upset or has a grudge um, that takes it out by putting things on the computer or putting things that will be downloaded. There is software that's available and it tracks and monitors what all employees do and all their activity. Depending on the number of employees, the functions of the organization, there could be someone who is employed full time to do nothing but monitor activity logs. We know that it isn't very long after a person accesses the wrong file or a file that they didn't really have any business looking at, and somebody's coming to talk to them about it. We know that in the college, that's happened when they haven't understood when a faculty is making assignments and has to look at charts of the patients on their unit to see which ones would be good experiences for the student, and we've had to explain why they were in there and what they were looking at. Let's talk about a few security tools. There are a wide range of tools available that organizations can use to protect its information, and they can be software, such as antivirus programs, or hardware, such as a proxy server. Now, we also know we have email scanning software and antivirus software, and it should never be turned off, and we should always run the updates. So we know that when things come in our email, they're either put into a junk file or they're deleted if they don't meet the requirements put in place by the system. Softwares also can scan messages, instant messages, and automatically delete spam email. Now, a firewall can either be hardware or software or a combination of both, and it's set up to examine the traffic to and from the network. It's looking at what sites you're going to and what's coming from them all the time. They're really electronic security guards at the gate of the corporate network, and they block different things that the corporation has decided, or institution, that you cannot use. Different things, maybe like Google or Google Drive, different things like that, they've started to block. Hardware security tools also help. They prevent the users from directly accessing the internet from a corporate computer or only be able to access certain sites. It masks the protection of people using the World Wide Web, and it tracks employees who are using masks or something and directs them appropriately where they can go. There's hardware and software that also monitor what users are doing and what they're accessing, because corporations must be diligent to monitor for unauthorized access of their networks. They are responsible to be sure that their confidential files are not breached, either externally by someone trying to get sensitive information about our patients, or their social security numbers, but also that employees are not compromising the system by going to sites that can download some kind of malware onto the computer. Because you have to remember that any use of a secured network leaves a digital footprint, and it can easily be tracked by electronic auditing software. Also, we have portable devices. So offsite use of portable devices like your laptop or PDAs or home computing systems or smartphones. These are all storage devices that help us to streamline healthcare delivery, like our email on our phones, but they also can cause breaches. And we all know most of the time, if you have access to any kind of system on your phone, it has to have a password in order to get into it, so not that everyone can get into your phone. Also, there's a thing called a virtual private network, or VPN, and that's the only way people can get into like their own computer at work. And it's a program and software that's put on by IT, and then you can log in and see your desktop where you work. The problem is it works well, slow, and sometimes it doesn't work on all types of computers. It doesn't work very well on Mac computers. But the agency has the ultimate responsibility to protect the integrity of its data, and it's required by high tech and the HIPAA regulations. Now, if a device is stolen or lost, there has to be clear procedures put into place that can be sure that that sensitive data doesn't get released or used inappropriately. So if you lose your phone, then they can remote into it and take anything off of it that they need to protect the security of their organization. Now, the last chapter in this class is called Improving Workflow and Meaningful Use. It goes together a little bit with the chapter we did from last week. And it also has some helpful hints about when you want to develop new technology. So does the security chapter, but so does this also. Because as you're thinking about implementing new technology, and from the case study you saw it wasn't very successful the first time, these are some of the things that you need to think about as you are developing or implementing a new type of software. So we're going to look at the purpose of conducting workflow analysis and design. We're going to look at some specific instructions on workflow analysis, a little bit of measures about efficiency and effectiveness. And we know that when these systems work well, that it helps to prevent errors. When we improve our workflow and our meaningful use, then we are able, nurses and practitioners are able to do their jobs more efficiently and effectively with much less error. So when you think of workflow and technology, workflow is really a term that's just used to describe the action or execution of a series of tasks that we do in a prescribed sequence. It's those tasks, events, and interactions that comprise a work process and involve two or more people and create or add value to the organization's activities. A school of thought suggests that technology should be designed to meet the needs of clinical workflow. That's one school of thought. To me, that should be the only school of thought, because if it should be designed to meet the needs of the workflow. So optimization of the process of moving conditions past their current state into a more efficient method is the goal. So nursing informatics should always be included in these activities. They need to represent the needs of the clinician and serve as a liaison for technology solutions to process problems so that they work together. So a critical aspect of informatics role is workplace design or workflow design. And nursing informatics are uniquely positioned to engage in the analysis and redesign of processes and tasks surrounding the use of technology, because we know the flow of nursing, we know how to talk to the nurses and the clinicians who are using it, and informatics specialists have the technology part also, so they know how to put the two of those together. So as we examine workflow analysis, it's important because that the informaticists be an essential part of the team to help it be successful. But the workflow to redesign team has to be interdisciplinary. It also has to have people right down in the trenches, those working on the clinical floor, who are doing the process and going to use the technology, or it's never going to be successful. They have to be a part of the process. So they have to be directly engaged. They can speak about the intricacy of the process and variations from the norm. Why are we doing it differently than what we think we're going to do? Well, because it doesn't work that way, or it wasn't designed the right way. So you have to build the right team with the right members on it in order to implement a technology successfully. We'll talk a little bit about value versus waste. You know, in this economy and in the healthcare arena today, we have to be sure and not have any waste or any downtimes. So a value-added activity or step is one that ultimately brings the process closer to completion or changes the product or service for the better. Some steps in the process might not necessarily add value, but sometimes they're regulatory or compliancy based and they still have to be a part of it. This is the underpinning of the lean philosophy, and if you're a part of Unity Point at all, you know that they've adopted the lean philosophy, and I do believe the college is looking kind of towards that also. It's the removal of waste activities from workflow. Waste is classified as unnecessary activities or an excess of products to perform the tasks. Now, there are variations that occur when workers perform the same function in different ways, and usually occurs because of flaws in the way a process was originally designed, which is what I was talking about a little bit earlier. Lack of knowledge about the process, or because the process cannot be executed as originally designed, because it disrupts workflow. So when we talk about the future, our future state's constructed when we have the best knowledge of how the process will ideally work. We need to move from the current state to a future state, and we need to do a gap analysis. What's the difference between where we are today and what we have found to be waste or wasteful actions and what we want it to be tomorrow? So then gap analysis zeroes in on these major areas that will be affected by the change. And usually technology is a part of that gap. But what often happens in a redesign effort is that it's exact or near exact replication of the current state and doesn't necessarily always work. So technology implementations alone represent a significant change for clinicians as does the workflow design that accompanies technology. You have to take that into consideration, and that is a very important fact when it comes to implementing new processes and new technologies, is that you are changing the way someone does their job, takes care of their patients, um, and that can be, we all know when we go through change, we go through a grief process. And so, how do you mitigate that and how do you get everyone on board? Um, Often, the degree of change, in fact, is underappreciated. Sometimes those who are making the changes and don't understand how hard and how different it is what they want someone to do. So, engagement of the end user is a critical aspect of change management before it's adopted. And without it, change is resistant and efforts are subject to failure. Just like what the case study presents to you, the first implementation was not all that successful. So when you design your second phase of that assignment and you're going to implement the next phase of the technology, what will you do differently? What will you add in there so that that change will be successful? Now, there are many change theories that you can use, but using one type of one change theory as you plan for an implementation of some kind of technology is very important. And so you need to become knowledgeable about at least the one that works the best for you. This is the last presentation in this class, and I hope they've helped and that this will help you with your end paper.